we're going to welcome Patrick Tkaczynski. Patrick Tkaczynski is a behavioral ecologist based at Liverpool John Moores University in the UK. And his main research interest is to understand how different wild animals manage their social lives and the impact these choices have on social structures. So welcome, Patrick. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try and share my screen. So, full screen mode. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. Okay, great. So thank you very much for the invitation to present today. Very cool talks so far. The project I'm going to be talking about is one that myself and Liz Campbell have been conducting, looking at social time allocation, emotional contagion, and social attention as possible assays of positive welfare in wild animals. So most animal welfare research has often been focused on minimizing suffering, but in increasing years, people are focusing more and more on how we can maximize or indeed measure positive welfare. And in many social animals, two social interactions are thought to be key in terms of both forming positive social relationships and also positive experience. And those are playing and grooming. So you can see on this slide here, you've got some pictures of baboons, red pandas, and some crows involved in doing some preening. And these behaviors are really important in terms of forming positive social relationships, which we know for many wild animals are important for health and survival. But some historical and more kind of invasive studies have been able to show that these behaviors are also involved with physiological pleasure. They trigger neuroendocrinological reward systems, like the release of endorphins and things like that. So for the project that I've been working on, this pilot project that we've been working on, our key aim was to see whether we could develop a framework to be able to monitor positive welfare in wild animals using play and grooming. To do this, then we needed an animal model that had well-established indicators of negative welfare. So this is kind of the triangulation theme that was introduced by Professor Bateson earlier. But we also needed a population with a lot of expected variation in welfare risks as well as welfare benefits, so either between groups or between individuals. So for our study, we have been focusing on wild Barbary macaques, which are the monkeys that you can see on this slide here. They are highly social. They live in large groups with a mixture of adult males and adult females and all their offspring, but they're also highly endangered. They're endemic to Morocco and Algeria, and the largest populations are in Morocco. You might have seen these monkeys before because they're kind of famous in Gibraltar, but that's an introduced population and not particularly relevant for my talk, but just in case you're interested, why they're endangered is that they are under a threat from poaching for the pet trade, and unfortunately, the kind of cedar and oak forests that they like to live in are getting rapidly depleted. So in this top left picture here is a map of northern Morocco, and those red dots in the middle, hopefully you can see them, highlight where we've been conducting our study in the Ifrane National Park. So you can see the Strait of Gibraltar at the top there. And this is zoomed in on a particular part of forest within the Ifrane National Park. And these red dots actually represent where we went and collected our data this summer. And I've translated those dots into some home range polygons on this slide here. I don't know whether you can see my cursor or not. I'm going to carry on and assume that you can. So this big purple blob here is from the purple group, and this is this green blob down here is from the green group. And these are two monkey groups that very rarely come into contact with humans. They are wilder groups of monkeys that we follow. Whereas these other groups, including this blue group down here, which also has a large home range, come into contact fairly regularly with humans in different ways. So in the top here, this yellow blob that you can see is the Azru group, and they're so called because they're right next to this town of Azru. So they're pretty much urban monkeys most of their nutrition comes from raiding bins. And these two other groups highlighted in the red circles in the middle and on the right of the screen are two groups that go regularly to an area of road where there is a big car park and tourists come to look at the monkeys and also to feed the monkeys. So a lot of variation between these groups in terms of their home range sizes, the amount of times that they're interacting with humans. And we know that there are health consequences to these interactions with humans. So this monkey on the left here has actually lost his hand from getting hit by a car, sitting by the road. And then these other two monkeys are sitting there drinking highly sugary soda drinks. And if you study monkeys, you can kind of see some indication in this female in the middle who's drinking this apple soda that a lot of these monkeys that spend a lot of time in these tourist areas are very clearly obese. She's not as bad as some of the others there. So there are at least, we think anyway, well, we know actually, we know from other studies that there are health consequences for these monkeys that spend a lot of time hanging around with tourists, but how does that translate into positive welfare? So for this project, we studied 6 different groups, and they have this highly variable exposure to human stressors, and they have a lot of variation between groups then as well in terms of their access to food and water resources. These oak and cedar forests are not particularly abundant habitats for these monkeys to live in, and that's kind of getting worse with climate change as well. And these groups are highly variable in size. So I think the smallest group is 10 individuals in total, and the largest group is 80 individuals in total. So there's a lot of variation going on, which kind of creates, like harking back to Mikhail's talk, it kind of creates a natural experiment rather than an intervention to look at how a lot of these different factors might be influencing welfare. So what is our new measure of welfare, or what are we trying to validate? Well, both grooming and play are complex social interactions. They require a lot of complex communication. They require a lot of attention to the social cues of your partner. So in this picture here, you can see 2 young Barbary macaques playing with one another, and the individual on the right has a facial expression that is not a million miles away from what would actually be a proper aggressive face, but they are actually playing in this. So playing, coming into close contact quarters with another individual through grooming, all these things need relatively complex cognition in order to ensure that these encounters are positive rather than negative. And we assume that a lot of these behaviors would take a lot of time to develop the skills during ontogeny, during development. That developing these skills also requires a lot of access to social partners and potentially to social information from watching other individuals have these interactions. So generally the idea is we want to see whether socializing frequently and socializing well, so having positive social outcomes from these interactions, might be reflective of positive welfare in these different groups and across different individuals. So we're kind of, in some ways, taking like cognitive and attention bias into the wild, seeing how easy it is to measure and whether it has any potential use in terms of monitoring welfare in wild animals or in wild macaques. And monkeys are kind of useful to do this in because, and again, going back to this kind of triangulation idea that's come up today, we have a lot of really well-established indicators of anxiety and negative well-being in primates. Things like self-scratching, bare teeth yawns, body shakes and shivers. They've been shown through pharmacological studies and a lot of behavioral observation studies to be pretty clear indicators of negative well-being. And as well, in captive macaques at least, we know that social attention is a pretty good reflection of the emotional state of an individual. So from captive studies, it's been shown that individuals that are in low mood, perhaps because they've just had been aggressed themselves, tend to pay more attention to negative interactions, and those that are have been shown to be in a good mood pay more attention to positive social interactions. So can we use these measures of negative welfare to help validate what might be some more kind of subtle elements of positive welfare in Barbary macaques? So to do this through the funding from the Wild Animal Initiative, we have been able to hire 2 research assistants who spent 2.5 months following 6 different groups. And they've been recording 2 different types of video samples from individuals in these groups. They've been recording playbouts, and then they've been recording longer 10-minute focal observations. And we've also recorded the number of humans present when these video samples have been taken. And from the playbouts, we're looking at these quite subtle measures and seeing how easy they are to measure and to quantify. Things like the level of synchrony, the diversity of gestures, the diversity of vocalizations that might be going on within a playbout, and then importantly, the outcome that from these, whether they descend into actual aggression or not. From the focal observations, from these 10-minute focal observations, we can get quite a lot of data. So we can look at activity budgets, which have already been mentioned as potential indicators of welfare. We can look at how much time individuals are dedicating to both positive or negative social interactions, so aggressions or grooming and play that we're interested in. And we can look at these indicators of anxiety that I've mentioned, things like self-scratches. And then importantly, we want to see whether it is possible from videos to be able to determine whether individuals are paying attention to the social interactions that are going on around them in the same way as been done in captive studies, and particularly see whether we can determine whether individuals are paying more attention to positive or negative interactions that are occurring around them. And for this, we have this idea or prediction, because there's a lot of variation between the groups and across, even within groups, across times of day, there's a lot of variation in the amount of human presence that they're being exposed to. And we think that the more humans that are around, the more stressed the macaques are going to be. And this has kind of been shown in other studies before. And if they're more stressed, they're going to have less time to dedicate to playing and grooming. And as a consequence, we should see an increase in negative welfare indicators. So these anxiety indicators like scratching or paying attention to negative social interactions around them. And if this kind of holds up, then we can kind of make some inferences about the novel positive welfare assays. So we should see then that things like gestural diversity and synchrony and attention to positive social interactions instead have like a negative relationship with the number of humans present. So we don't have any results here, proper results yet. The data collection finished in September, but we have a lot of data from just 2.5 months worth of data collection. So we've got 339 of these video samples. I'm not going to go through these different plots here because they're not really results. It's just showing off the data that we've collected. But we have a lot of different age groups that these video focal samples have been collected in as well. So we can hopefully see some age variation in positive and negative welfare, which might be interesting in relation to human interactions. And we've got about 92 of these playbouts, which will be a bit more complicated to code. And someone mentioned in one of the last talks a question about using AI to code these things. We are collaborating within our university with some mathematicians that do a lot of machine learning to see how viable these videos collected would be for machine learning and potentially identifying both these positive and negative welfare indicators. So hopefully that might be nice to automate some of the coding that's got to come. And these 2 plots, so on the y-axis here, you've got humans in the area, and then the group on the bottom is just to show that there are these 2 groups that are highly exposed to humans. And the only predator that really exists in Morocco for the macaques are feral dogs. And there's a bit of variation between these groups in their exposure to these kind of threats to their health and welfare. So it's early days in the project. We've got a lot of video coding to get done, but we do know, or we've confirmed that there is this between group variation in movement in terms of home range size and human exposure. Anecdotally, we actually are finding that play and grooming seem to be much more common in the monkeys that are in tourist areas. So actually going against our initial expectations. And this is probably because wild groups move more and have to forage more and therefore have less time for social interactions. So we're actually getting quite a complex welfare picture developing. These monkeys in tourist areas might have more time for social interactions, but yeah, but this might be offset by health costs of diet and stress, which came up in Professor Bateson's talk. And we have some ongoing and upcoming projects looking at some physiological health measures that might help us triangulate and validate the positive welfare things that I've been talking about. So a big thank you to Ganya and Sophie, who went out and collected the data with the support of our Moroccan field team. Big thank you to Matt Gardner, PhD student who helped train and support Ganya and Sophie. And a huge thank you to Professor Imad Shkawi, who's my key collaborator in Morocco. And thanks for your attention.